Thanks for the Black Lodge podcast. We are based, yes,
Vanna? The world's greatest retrospective podcast.
Thank you.
It's on the screen, so it has to be fact.
And this right here, this is my co-host, sometimes drunk, always
fat.
Fat Tony. Hey man, I'm not far behind. Bulbous Brandon, is that a good nickname? Over the past 5 years, me and my companion friend here, we've been taking a journey into the depths of cult film and horror. You know, the good grody stuff. Some of the films this gentleman over here has worked on. We're going to be diving into the career of the great Brian Brimmer. Now, Brian, first question up.
First, I want to say, my friends in the room, he called me a living legend, so
exactly.
Remember that?
No.
It's only the truth.
When we go to dinner.
Only truth. Yeah. Now, on the count of three, I want to hear you guys say living legend. 1, 2, 3. Living legend! Exactly.
We're not going to forget this in Key West either.
You have had such a varied career, a really interesting career in film, and I'm going through your IMDb, and there's the things I know, and there's some of the things I don't know. This guy worked on a Tyler Perry film,
several, yeah,
and a TV show. That's so opposite of the horror genre, which you found this wonderful niche in. I'm just curious. Before you found yourself in the filmmaking business, was horror on your periphery, or is it something you kind of just fell into?
No, interestingly, I mean, I grew up watching these same movies, and I loved them. I would stay up Friday nights with my friends, and sometimes we would do a little something, and we would watch, sometimes not anymore. And we would, watch horror movies late at night. Some of you guys have come to the table and said that you found Society or Pumpkinhead by going to the video store and getting a bunch of videos with your pals. That's what I did. That was me. But when I started, I went to Pepperdine University, and I got a full scholarship at the last minute. I had nowhere to go. And my mother took me to the Southeastern Theater Conference. I auditioned and got a full ride to Pepperdine, which at the time I didn't even realize what that was. And because I was going to go to the University of South Carolina. That's where I'm from, South Carolina, North Carolina. And my dad said, full ride, that's where you're going. Okay. And I'd been acting. I'd done theater in school, like a lot of us do. That's how we get started. And went there on a full theater and playwriting scholarship, because I had written some plays at the time. But didn't know what I was getting into at all. But when I went there, oh boy, okay. Is this a long story? The first thing I did, as part of the scholarship, you had to be in the different plays, and I was in a play called Camelot. I played Mordred in Camelot, one of my favorite roles. He's evil, he's wicked. And a talent agent was there. That was a benefit of being in Los Angeles. And they asked me to come read for them. I signed with them, the Gage Group. And one of the very first auditions they got me was Pumpkinhead. And I remember the agent said, it's a horror movie, kid. Everybody's got to do one. And, at least you don't have to take your pants off. Okay. Fine, okay. So I went and auditioned. And I went and auditioned for Stan Winston. And I remember it very clearly. I don't remember a lot of things, but I'll never forget this day. It was in Van Nuys, in a little office building. I didn't know who Stan was, at the time. And we auditioned the scene. Have you seen Pumpkinhead? Mostly? Okay. So there's a scene where we're in the old burnout church. And he's like, when a man does something wrong, and he does something wrong to another man, he can call up this thing in his name, whatever. That was the audition scene. And we did the audition. And I had a real Southern accent because I'm from North Carolina, which is funny.
Represent the South, my friend.
You know it, baby. And while we're doing the scene, it's a very intense scene, very spooky scene. It was broad daylight. We're in an office building. Someone in the office next door dropped something. And it scared me so badly that the scene was great. It just happened. It was one of those weird acting moments where holy shit, I was terrified. And I got the part. And I knew when I read the script that it was more than a horror movie. I knew it. I really did. I thought it was beautiful and eloquent and really a morality story. Well, anyway, I got the part, and this was in March or something. It was Academy Award time, whenever they have that. And I was in my apartment in Woodland Hills with my roommates. There were 12 of us in this apartment. And the Oscar for Best Special Effects goes to Stan Winston for Aliens. And Stan Winston walks up on the stage, and I called my mom in South Carolina. I said, Mom, that's the guy. That's the guy. I'm going to do this. I'm doing a movie with that guy. And then, of course, I learned who Stan Winston was. And so, yeah, it wasn't something that I planned, but I think as an actor or a creative person, you don't really plan your career. You have goals and you have milestones that you want to try to reach, like get your SAG card, write that book, finish the screenplay. But you never know where it's going to take you. And that's how it started. And I fell in love. I fell in love with that whole crew, the whole experience, Tom Woodruff, Stan. They were wonderful people. And after that, I started getting a lot of auditions for Saturday Night Five, Society, and Brian, of course, cast me in a couple of things. Anyway, no, so it wasn't like I didn't go to LA going, I'm going to be in horror movies. I went and said I'm going to be an actor. So, and of course, you know, I still had my day, I still had school. I had day jobs for a good portion of my career, really until I was up in my early 30s and started doing voiceover work. And that's where I started to, I love voiceover because you don't have to have your picture taken ever. I can work in my underwear from my home. Most of the time I put on pants. But I really did fall in love with voice acting, so that's been my focus. And then because I was in Atlanta, I just got auditions for Tyler Perry. And at the same time, I opened a comedy theater, Sketchworks Comedy, and it was the first sketch comedy only theater in Atlanta. Ran for 15 years and is still going. Sold it for $10 to the people that rent it now, because we were a nonprofit, you know. So comedy was really my thing, and I did comedic plays in school, and that's really where I thought I'd be. But he hired me to play several, kind of the same character in the movies and the TV shows. I was the token gay. And that was fine by me. I loved it. It was really fun. So, and then most recently, I don't really pursue on camera now because I'm really busy with voiceover and I work in the talent side and all kinds of things. I think to be successful as a creative, you have to really diversify and know how to do lots of different things. I tell all my acting students, I'm like, write, produce, make your own content. Like, you have to do that. But I always thought comedy would be my thing, and okay, so if I'm asked for, and I don't mean that like I'm a star, because I'm not, I'm a working actor, absolutely 100%, but I've been around a long time. So sometimes the casting director will say, well, audition for this because I hear you in this, and I never turn that down. Because my father told me once that the way he was successful was he learned everything he could about whatever he was trying to do, and then he walked through every door that opened, no matter what. Now, it may not be for you what's on the other side of that door, but you gotta walk through the door. So if I'm asked for, I always audition. So I do like a movie every 2 years, you know? The last one I did, I really want you guys to see it. It's non-genre, but it's the sweetest little movie if you have kids. It's called Permanent, and it's with Rainn Wilson and Patricia Arquette. And it's basically about this little girl who, right before her first day of junior high school, gets the worst permanent of her life. The worst ever, in my beauty salon. And that's a comedy. So I really love comedy. I'm dying to do another genre pick. I'm dying to do another movie in our world. And I think now that these movies are getting so much attention, that probably will be something that I put on. Have connection. I know you do. I know you do. So anyway, long answer.
Oh no, please! You make my job extra easy. Just spill out like a water fountain.
I'm so high on adrenaline and coffee right now. This is overwhelming. It's really amazing. I really appreciate all you guys, and I gotta say that. Thank you all for coming to talk to me.
And give yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So first up on the docket, you alluded to it, Pumpkinhead. Legendary film. Working with Stan Winston, Academy Award-winning special effects artist. However, this was his first venue into working as a director. I'm just curious if you could maybe speak upon what it was like working with a first-time director, the complications, or was it easy going?
Well, as a first-time director, working with a first-time film actor, it was my very first movie, my very first time ever on film, so I didn't think of him as a first-time director, but he was. He was an actor's director. He loved us. If you remember in the movie, there's the first scene where you see me and my sisters and brothers, including Blossom, my biologic, who did Beaches right after Pumpkinhead. Yeah. She's sweet, she's wonderful. And we did that scene, and it was my first day on any kind of film set. And it was really overwhelming, the cameras, and we're on location, and 100 people. And in the scene, we just do the keep away from Pumpkinhead unless you're tired of living. His enemies are mostly dead, his mean and unforgiving. Laugh at him and you're undone, but in some awful fashion. Vengeance he considers fun. And that's the scene. And then
chills. You gave me chills, man.
Then multiply it. It's electrifying. And then in the scene, Cynthia Bain goes, stop it, you're scaring him. And that was the scene. Well, we did the scene, and I was nervous. Oh my God, I was a nervous wreck, and did not feel that I'd done well. I'm sure I did. I'm always very self-critical, but in my mind, I was like, oh my God, I was awful. And that night, I went home to my apartment in Woodland Hills, again, the one with 8 people, and I was up half the night thinking about how I'd just blown my chance at anything. And I know it sounds terrible because I wasn't that bad. But I had an idea. I decided to ask Stan if he would reshoot the scene with me. I did. I had balls back then. I don't know if I do that. I probably would do that today. I said, we got there. We're still in the same location, right? And so the whole setup's there, all the same actors. And I said, Stan, I had an idea for that scene we shot yesterday. Now this is really brazen. You got to be careful about this. And he's so kind. He goes, okay, what is it? I'm like, okay, what if we're taunting the kid and she says, stop it, and I walk up and I threaten her and jump at her. He goes, oh, I love it, let's shoot it. I'm like, oh God, really? So basically redid the entire scene. We got a battery issue. We basically redid the... Hey, look, it's a swap out. Hello?
There we go.
We basically redid the entire scene, and it ended up being what it was. And it actually, that shows you what kind of director he was, because he was interested in character development and in showing subtle little things about the character. And that gave me permission to be creative, which for an actor in a director-actor relationship, nothing better. I knew he trusted me, I knew he trusted my ideas, and I trusted him. And I've worked with a lot of really cool directors, and all the really great directors that I've gotten to work with were that way. And it set the stage for the whole movie. There were lots of things in the movie. The bedroom scene with Devon and Odessa, which is so funny. My very well-endowed 12-year-old sister. Where we were given permission to do little things, little nuances. And I think that approach to the movie is what made the movie what it is. So he's a great director. I do remember one very clear image of him the night we shot the church scene before nightfall. That film was made by the De Laurentiis Entertainment Group, Dino De Laurentiis. That's who made it. And the executives were always on stand about budget time. And I remember one day when they, 2 guys in suits and him, were off in the distance and they were just yelling at him and he was yelling at them. And he said at the time that he would never direct again, that was it. It was too stressful. Somebody told me it gave him a spastic cold, and I don't think it was him, but somebody told me that. Anyway, it just, it was very stressful. And sure enough, he did Monster Squad right after Pumpkinhead, but he didn't really, he went back to creating those beautiful monsters. Because he was the living legend. And he passed a couple of years ago, and it was very sad, because he took us to his house before the film to get to know all the cast members. He had a big rat party at his house, beautiful. He had what looked like Snow White's house on crack in Laurel Canyon. It was a thatched roof, beautiful, like Tudor-style mansion. It was like a fairy tale house with a door and everything. Anyway, he was wonderful. Yeah, he was just great. I'm gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry.
Now, you alluded to something
Good question.
that is absolutely key to the film, and that's the creation of just the wonderful monsters, not just in Pumpkinhead, but just on down the line. Stan Winston, one of the greatest special effects artists ever, and I think the crowning achievement in terms of horror probably is the Pumpkinhead monster. What was it like seeing this monstrosity of a thing for the first time on set?
Hilarious. It was cool. I mean, it was great. Back then there were no digital effects, so it was all practical. It was sculpted. It was art. If you see at my table the mask, he had made like 12 masks, I think, because progressively as the movie goes on, it starts to look more and more like Lance, And so there was the monster, and then it starts to look like Lance in the face. Made all those. Some of them were fully articulated animatronic. Some of them were just, what do they call them? Working masks. And then the hero mask would be the one that could move. They don't do that anymore. It's all digital. I mean, you know, practical effects were all the movies that I was in, and it is such an art form. And it's an art form now. You just have different tools. But Tom Woodruff was in the suit. But it was great. It was like you saw the monster and you went, this is awesome. It was scary. Then it became hilarious because you work with this thing over and over and over, and Tom Woodruff is in the suit. He's the greatest guy in the world. Next time I do a show, I'll bring my scrapbook and put it at the table because I have some great still shots of Tom. Now, so he was in the suit, in a harness, in the suit. His feet actually stop where the knees of the monster are. And then the rest of that is puppetry. And they have him on a wire, and they're moving the puppets. And his face is actually in the neck of the creature. And in some of the scenes, if you look closely enough, you can see the eyeballs. Very, very tiny. Well, so when we were shooting, what they would do, if I was with the monster, or like the scene where the monster lifts Jeff East up on the motorbike and throws him, Tom is actually in his tennis shoes where the monster's knees are, up on this big ramp. So I have pictures of Pumpkinhead in Nikes at the knee, you know, because they're only shooting him from here up. My favorite thing, people ask me a lot, like, was it scary? Like, were you really scared? And the answer is no, yes, because you're an actor, and your job is to truly feel that emotion, otherwise you guys won't. But some of it are tricks of the camera. My favorite scene, for this reason, is the scene where Pumpkinhead comes into the cabin to find me, because I got him in the way, and anybody that gets in the way, it's got to kill them too, right? That's what Haggis says. And he comes in, and I'm in the closet. You guys remember this scene? I'm in the closet, and he looks in the closet, and I'm down here, and he acts like he doesn't see me, right? And then he turns like he's gonna leave, and then he jumps back and gets me, and you see me scream. Well, that was shot from behind me. So they took the wall. This was shot where they shot Little House on the Prairie on the Newhall Ranch. And so all those cabins were Mr. Ingalls' cabins, the doctors, and all that stuff. The barn is Mr. Olson's barn, right? So those cabins, you could remove the walls to shoot camera work. So this was shot about 3 o'clock in the morning. We had 2 cases of Jolt soda to keep ourselves awake, and they took the back wall of the closet out and shot from behind me, so that they could feature the monster when he came in. And you see me screaming from like this angle, you see, and actually, the whole crew had gotten punch drunk. We were all laughing hysterically, including Tom, so the suit would be jiggling and Stan would be like, the suit's jiggling, Tom, and that made us laugh even more. So when you see me screaming, I'm actually laughing hysterically. And you can, if you know it, you can tell. Because it's all but a big smile on my face, but it looks like a scream. You know, it looks the same. So that's what it was like. And Tom is wonderful. I saw somebody brought something to the table that's signed by him. And I know he does few shows, but if you ever get a chance to meet Tom Woodruff, he is the practical man in a lot of the monster suits in all kinds of movies that you might not know. So look him up and you'll see his creature work is astounding.
So in speaking about the creature, we actually have an extra special thing on the docket. Mr. Brian Brimmer has been kind enough to autograph a 1999 McFarlane. Oh, don't drop your microphone.
It's off.
We're doing a silent auction for this. And 100% of the proceeds are going to the Ronnie James Dio Stand Up and Shout Cancer Fund.
Yeah.
I'm sure those among you, cancer has touched your life in some way, but this is an excellent way to give back, and hopefully we can put a small dent in this horrible plague that's upon mankind, and get a nice piece of...
You can't find that thing anymore. I'm surprised you have it.
Well, it's going to hopefully go home with somebody today. So at any point, you want to check that out. Fat Tony will be around. And I also want to invite all of you, if you have questions about Pumpkinhead, raise your hand and he'll come to you, and we'll make that happen.
I want to say real quick, thank you guys. Thank you guys for doing that.
Oh,
Yeah. That's good. Thank you.
Clap for me. Clap for him. He's the one that gives it value. We're just the vessel to make it get from point A to point B.
Pumpkinhead.
Y'all are not going to be able to live with me anymore. But tomorrow I get to go back and be regular Brian.
Well, today you're superstar.
Oh, you're sweet.
So
Living legend.
living legend. Count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Living legend.
All right. Very, very good.
No way.
Give me a second.
Oh.
Do that one more time.
God, y'all, thank you for playing.
All right. 1, 2, 3.
Living legend.
Very good.
Thank you.
Now, one more thing about Pumpkinhead before we continue on, and because I actually have a little story I would like to tell about Pumpkinhead.
Marvelous.
At what point did you realize when Pumpkinhead came out that you were sort of solidified in a piece of pop culture history?
Years later. You know, when it was first released, they released it in the theaters. I don't think many or any of you are old enough to remember that. But it came out in the theaters, and it was in the theaters for 2 weeks, and it bombed. I think people thought the name was silly. So I remember in LA, for sure, casting did not respect it at all. And that was a thing. And I think people thought it was something silly, something crazy. It did really well in those 2 weeks, but for some reason they pulled it. They pulled it. And I think that might have been when De Laurentiis Group went bankrupt. Anyway, they pulled it, and MGM UA bought it, and then it sat on their shelf for years, at least 4 or 5 years. And then somehow HBO picked it up. I don't know if you guys remember this. HBO. No. HBO picked it up and started running it, and suddenly it started finding its audience, and then the Sci-Fi Channel picked it up. And that's when it really, and that was probably 6 or 7 years after we made the movie. It was everywhere all of a sudden. So that's funny how that kind of thing happens. It's like society. Like society has just recently, some of you guys I've talked to have, everybody says, oh, I saw that when I was a kid. I'm like, what kind of kid were you that watched that? How old were you? Where was your mama? Anyway, so a lot of you have seen it and known it for a long time, but that film is just recently getting a lot of traction, which has surprised me. So they take a while, if it's not like your big mainstream blockbuster or whatever. But it's been several years now, but I remember the first time someone asked me to sign something. That was a long time ago. But it was a long time after the movie was made. And even, I've got to tell you honestly, I just started doing shows last year. Peter Valderrama was here, my manager.
Hardest working in entertainment.
Yes, give him a hand. Woo! He approached me, and I was like, Peter, nobody, who's going to give a shit? Nobody's going to care. And so this is only my second show. So I am so grateful to all you guys, and so overwhelmed by your love and support and your love of the films. I really am. But so today, I would say, is certainly the first time in my life that anyone has called me a living legend, except
I broke that cherry.
Except maybe my mother in a very sarcastic way. Oh, you're a living legend, aren't you? So really, it's an ongoing realization of how many people that and these other movies have touched, and that it's become a part of something that they grew up with. A couple of people today have said, I grew up watching you, and I'm like, oh, you're Walt Disney. Like you're twisted Walt Disney. It's crazy. So really, it's only recently, and I've been getting, people send me stuff to sign for the last several years, a lot of Silent Night 5, people will send me stuff. So I know that it's out there. Anyway.
Okay, now in spades, my friend. You made a point there to say that no one was old enough here to have seen Pumpkinhead in theater. Now, a lot of you may not know this, and he's absolutely correct, because it did get pulled from theaters. It had a limited run in '88, but then it got a small release in '89. 1989, in January, was the first movie I ever saw in the theater.
Wow, what?
Yes.
Yeah.
How old were you?
I was
Too
6.
young.
And
Where was your mother?
my mother was none the wiser. However, I had a kooky grandmother. I won't get into the ins and outs about it, but my grandmother, when she would be tasked with watching me, for whatever reason, movies would shut me the hell up. So she took me to Pumpkinhead, And oh, I shut up. I didn't speak for a couple of days, in fact, because I don't know how, who's from Tennessee around here? Just about everybody on the general area. But I grew up in Morristown, Tennessee, home of the Evil Dead, the original. And I saw this in the theater there. And my grandmother lived in what's called Hawkins County. It's called Overhome. This is, dirt roads and, scary backwoods hillbillies. So the whole ride home, after watching this movie, my grandmother, being just a loving, caring person, she goes, "Pumpkinhead's gonna get you." Wow. You literally have to go up Clinch Mountain and then down Clinch Mountain, and it's just nothing but dead trees, and it's so creepy, and the moon was full. And I remember laying my head to rest that night, and my grandmother waited 20 minutes after I fell asleep, and she said, "Pumpkinhead's gonna get you." She's still alive. My grandmother is still alive. But I'm going to wait till that last moment, that last breath comes to her. So that's my Pumpkinhead story. But I love Pumpkinhead. I think it's an amazing film, and you touched on it with just the little nuances, the characters and stuff. It's a film that has transcended the medium. I'm glad that you're getting your just due from it. Anybody got any questions about Pumpkinhead you want to direct to Mr. Brimmer before we move on? All right, we'll move on to our next film.
Oh shit, we're going film by film?
We're gonna touch some of the highlights.
Okay.
A film that has, as he stated, has become quite popular over the past few years, and it's a movie that changed my life the first time I saw it. A little film called Society. Woo! Okay.
It stays with you forever.
Show of hands. Who's
Wow, really?
That's impressive.
So the overwhelming comment when you guys have come to the table today has been, "Man, I'm a big fan of Society. That film is messed up."
Okay, first question, and this is the obvious one. When you read the script, what was your reaction to this?
Interesting.
I really couldn't tell you. None of us really knew. First of all, Brian Yasmin is a genius, and also one of the sweetest men ever. He's not at all strange or odd or off-putting. He's a lovely man, and you wonder, where do these things come from? It's like Stephen King. I met Stephen King. No, you met Stephen King. Stephen King, sorry. I have met Stephen King. Chuck met Stephen King. Chuck works at the Alliance Theater, and Stephen did a play there. But anyway, he's the sweetest man ever, and you go, where does all this stuff come from? Brian's the same way. Read the script. It wasn't that shocking or strange to me. Again, when you read a script, you're approaching it from an acting point of view. So what I'm focused on is Martin Petrie and how am I going to play this and who is he? What is he, since they're not quite human and yet they've lived here forever? They predate mankind. All of that fun stuff. That's fun. So I was really more about the fun of it. And then as we got into making it, a lot of us, because you do different scenes and you kind of forget, you're kind of living in the moment of the scene. And a lot of us really didn't understand what we were making. I mean, a lot of us really didn't. And then we got to that last scene. And we were all like, what the fuck? We're all
The
dripping
shunting, and yes, you were wondering.
dripping in methicil and going, what is this? So we really weren't sure. For a lot of us, it was strange, and it was just a weird world. It was a fun world, though, because we got to play the ultra-rich, and that is just fun to pretend. And the sets were really fun. And then, of course, screaming Matt George and the effects were, and Nick Benson, is just like, out of this world. So, anyway, when I read the script, I thought, oh, this is cool. I mean, it definitely felt like it was deeper than just a schlock film. It felt intelligent somehow. I felt I could bring intelligence to the character, and it was fun. But none of us really understood, because you don't know what the whole picture's going to look like. That's the director's job. Even when you shoot scene by scene by scene, the way the director and the editor put it together, the way the cinematographer shoots it, that's what makes the story of film, right? And so when I saw it for the first time, I was shocked. I loved the color. I loved that it was like 90210 on crack, you know, and we were playing on that whole, you know, the kids trend. And then the last scene, I just remember watching it, and that music, that almost carnival, you know, and it's like, this is weird. And that's what I thought. I thought it was very strange. And when it was first released, they would not release it in the United States. I don't know how many of you guys know this story. They wouldn't rate it. That last scene, and this is funny because when you watch it now, it does stick with you. But that man just he's got to take a call. It's paramount on the phone, Peter. Anyway, he's always doing that. Where was I? Oh yeah, so they wouldn't release it. They wouldn't give it a rating. They were going to go X. They didn't, and isn't that weird? Because nowadays, the stuff that's out there. And so it never got released theatrically here. It was released in the United Kingdom and became the #1 science fiction film in the UK that year. Where that blew my mind. I was like, God, I should have gotten paid a lot more for that. But that was cool. I mean, that was just really cool. But if you think about it, it has a very English sensibility. And I think that that's because Brian is a very international director. He thinks globally. He's not locked into any one specific area or region. And so, yeah, when I read it, again, you're reading it as an actor, and you're just like, okay, I gotta tell this story. And you're really just focused on telling the story. And then even after, you move on to the next thing and the next thing, and of course what you can't predict, and I don't think that Brian could predict or cares about, and you can't really care about this as an artist or a filmmaker, is, I mean, you want it to be liked, you want people to see it because it's your art, but you can't predict how the audience will react to it. There's no way. There's no way. So the reaction to it, which has been relatively recent on a large scale, has been really, really surprising, and I'm actually really, really happy that people like it. Oh, I don't know if like is the right word.
No, I think love would be the correct
Okay.
term. I love Society, and
Well,
I'm not
so
the only one. In fact, I reached out to a guy you're well familiar with by the name of Brian Usna. And yeah, he's actually been on the podcast before.
Oh, wonderful.
And he had a very nice quote about you that I'm going to read to everybody here, and forgive me if I misspeak. I don't have my glasses, I'm trying to look younger. Working with Brian Brimmer was a great experience. He played the duplicitous, that's a $10 word right there, Petrie in my directorial debut, Society. I was so impressed by his performance that when I was casting the Reanimator sequel, Bride of Reanimator, and it appeared briefly that Jeffrey Combs was going to be unable to reprise his iconic role of Herbert West, I encouraged Brian to read for the part.
That's right.
Of course, Jeffrey Combs was finally able to come back to
The poison didn't work.
But I think it would have been great to have seen Brian Brimmer's version of West. In fact, Brian more closely resembles the character as described by H.P. Lovecraft in the Herbert West Reanimator stories. A few years later, we cast Brian in the role of Mickey Rooney's son, Pino. As in, like, Pinocchio, we'll talk about that in a minute. Silent Night, Deadly Night 5, The Toymaker, and he was terrific. If you haven't seen Brian in that film, I strongly encourage you to. What a strange and creepy character he created. Brian is the real deal of acting. So, he drops a bomb right there.
No kidding. I had forgotten that he asked me to read for that. I do remember that now. I'm glad Jeffrey
Jeffrey did. I mean, I would never want to replace Jeffrey Combs, but something happened. That's amazing. I have never heard him say that, and that's really humbling.
Exclusive. Right now.
That's super humbling. Thank you, guys.
Now, obviously, Jeffrey has his niche carved out in
Oh,
horror history, but
Yeah.
but if the role had been given to you, like what would have been your source of inspiration when you went to the books, or would you have brought something sort of unique to it? Like, what would have been your process?
At that time in my 20s, I probably wouldn't have known enough to read a book. So I would have probably just approached it, and I know that character so well, it's so iconic, so I would have tried to put honor it. I think, yeah, probably going to the book. And I got to tell you honestly, with Brian, I wouldn't have been worried about it. He would have guided me through it. I was very young, and Brian was very hands-on as well, and very helpful. And so that would be fun. I think I had a dream that I played that character or something. It just feels right, you know. And I think I would have brought a lot of Martin Petrie to it, but maybe Martin Petrie grown up and more desperate, and yeah, wow. I mean, he sees or saw something in me that was enough of a similarity that I think it would have been a natural fit. But I would have played it. I would have honored the book. Yeah, I would have honored the book.
I think it would have been tremendous. I mean, obviously, history played out the way it did. Here's the thing, though.
Yeah.
H.P. Lovecraft's works with Herbert West is in the public domain. So, I mean, if the chance popped up now for you to play sort of a different version of Herbert West, would that be something you'd be interested in?
Oh, like the multiverse?
It's the multiverse of Reanimator.
You know, like where there were 3 Spider-Mans? That kind of tripped me out. Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't turn that down.
All right,
I
guys,
do
tweet it
that
right now.
Yeah.
Hashtag Brian Brimmer Reanimator. Get that shit trending now.
Oh, there's a question in the back.
Okay. Oh, got a question. It's back, Tony. Run!
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
The circumstance would have to be very right. You know, I would not take anything from another actor. That's just not, you know. But if Jeffrey wasn't going to do it for some reason and they were reinventing it and wanted to do a different angle on it, I would, if he was not doing it. But he would have to be in it. You know what I'm saying? To honor the franchise.
So while we're talking about that, can we maybe get a peek into the universe where you played Herbert West? Maybe just a little sample?
No. Certainly not. No, yeah, thank you. I don't know, yeah, hey, you know, hey. Probably something like that. I don't know. I'd have to prepare. An actor prepares.
Any more questions?
That's a great question.
Oh, we got a question over
We're
here.
prepared to do it.
Where? Oh, right here. Coming.
I can reach across to you.
I'll have to rewatch the movie and get some lines, and then I'll create something for you. I need a script. I mean, I'm a good improv but I need a script for that.
What was it like working with Screaming Mad George?
Awesome.
He was crazy. He was nuts. He's hyper, super creative. And just a genius. It's funny you say, because I was actually thinking, I've been taking walks on my breaks from the table, and I was thinking about the fact that he was a practical effects magician, and what an incredible artist he was from just the sculpturing. So yeah, remember The Guyver? Did you ever see The Guyver?
Yes.
When I was working with him on Silent Night 5, he had models of The Guyver in his studio, and he was explaining it to me very particularly and meticulously. And I actually wondered, he's still around, he's still working, and I wonder with the tools he has now, because he's not the kind of person that's going to say, poo-poo. He was the kind of person that's going to embrace all the tools and begin, and I bet he's probably happy to have these amazing tools. I even thought, I wonder what that shunting scene would have been like with the very good digital effects that we have now. And I know that seems to remove some of the craftsmanship of it, but I just wonder, because it doesn't really, you know, that's still a skill. But he was delightful. He was funny, kind of quiet. He'd giggle a lot. To make the suit for Pino, of course, I had to do a full body cast, and I asked them to carve it a little, muscle it up a little. But I had no penis. So, you know, anyway, and so I've spent a lot of time with him. That took a long time to make the body cast and the face that came off and all that stuff. So he was wonderful.
That's awesome.
That's a good transition right there to Silent Night Deadly Night 5.
One more question over here.
One
Coming.
second. I'm transitioning. You move in position and I'll...
Thank you for sharing.
Silent Night Deadly Night 5 is a strange movie.
Yeah.
Show of hands who's seen Silent Night Deadly Night 5.
Okay, good.
See it.
It's a good one.
All right. You guys have a question?
Oh, I just had one more society question.
Oh, yes.
Whenever I was a teenager, I found the movie in the early 90s when I watched, there was this VHS of Stephen King's Masters of Horror that shows this scene in it where you see ass face, and it's like, well, I want to know what this movie is.
Oh,
but-
I gotta ask.
So, what I wanted to ask you was in that scene when everybody's in there and the big orgy and all of that or whatever, what was going through your mind when that scene was being filmed?
Absolutely freaked out. No, in the moment, it was really fun to watch. It was fascinating because, you know, it's a series of shots, of course. It's not a continuous thing. And so Screaming George would come in and they'd have the glue and those when the faces stretched, that's a prosthetic that everybody had on their faces. And so he'd have to attach it very specifically. It was odd. It was odd, and that was a moment where, as an actor, it was slightly disturbing. Because the lights, the smoke, but then from a technical point of view, it was filled with smoke. And we were drenched in methicil, which I don't know if you know, but this is the same ingredient they put in McDonald's milkshakes to give it that texture. It's a clear, viscous liquid, and it is freezing cold. And we're all in our underwear. If you haven't seen it, you must. And so really, you're cold, and you're very tired, and it's smoky. And so there comes a point where, honestly, you're just ready for it to be done. I remember when I walked in and saw the giant sculpture of like the final shot when everyone is merged together, and that's one great big sculpture, and then actors would get inside of it and pop their faces out in certain places. That was at 6 a.m. And we're like, wow. Midnight, we're like, So you get to the point where it's just, you know, you're working, but it was quite impressive to walk in and see. I have to tell one quick story, and I don't know how much time we have, but I just have to tell this story about the butt face guy. Yeah. You know, that's the father. Yeah, his name escapes me now this bit, but he was in the movie. Well, there was a horror convention, so I actually have done another convention years ago. It was in San Diego, but it could have been Comic-Con, but I can't remember. But Brian called me, and he said that the actor who actually played Buttface wasn't available, and they really wanted to have Buttface at the convention. And they paid me. And of course, as an actor, at that time especially, who needs to eat, I'm like, sure. So I was Buttface at the convention. And I was on my knees all day, because there's a table here, and Buttface is sitting up, butt out on the table, and my head is popping through the anus. You guys haven't seen this yet. Oh, listen. I won't say it was a low point, but I will say this. Clive Barker was in the booth next door. And Brian says, you gotta come meet Clive. Come on. I'm like, oh. So, in the costume, they take me over to meet Clive Barker, and I'll never forget the look on his face. Oh. I'll never forget. That's when I got to meet Clive Barker. Put me in your movie. Never did.
All right, but we were running short on time. You're fine. You're absolutely fine. We don't want to tread on the Dinners of Death panel we're going to be doing with John Dugan. We're going to transition real quickly to Silent Night, Deadly Night 5.
Okay.
And there was a great deal of controversy surrounding this series, so before we get to 5, we've got to kind of take a trip back to 1984. Does anybody know the story of, I mean, a few of you know. So, a little film comes out in like November of 1984, and it does gangbuster business for about 2 weeks, and it gets pulled from theaters because, you know, mothers being mothers, Karens they call them these days, and that film got pulled, and it did well on VHS, but it spurred this whole thing of like the outrage of, you know, slasher films or the degradation of society. And this charge was led by a fellow by the name of Mickey Rooney. You guys know Mickey Rooney, one of the great legends of screen of the day. And he had this quote, "How dare they? I'm all for the First Amendment, but don't give me Santa Claus with a gun going to kill someone. The scum who made that movie should be run out of town." Now,
I want that in every movie.
less than a decade later, he decided, I need some money, and I want to be in Silent Night, Deadly Night 5. So, please, please tell us about working with Mickey Rooney, and in particular that fight scene, because that is just cinematic gold.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Thank you for educating me. And I know we don't have a lot of time, and I have a lot of Mickey Rooney stories. First of all, I knew who he was, obviously being a theater student, a film student, and I was like, what? And he was wonderful, just wonderful. He was super generous, really giving, and he never learns his lines. No, he has a photographic memory. He's done 177 films, and he said, I never learn my lines, just give me the scene. So they give him the scene right before we shoot, he does this. Okay. And spot on. Didn't improvise, didn't miss a word. He literally had a photographic memory. He said, I don't want it to get stale. If you rehearse, the spontaneity goes. And in film, I do believe, you capture these very real moments when you're filming something that sometimes aren't repeatable. It's more behavior than rehearsed performance. And I thought that was fascinating. I learned my lines. I was like, and he was a nut, man. He was a nut. He talked about Judy Garland, Judy Garland, Judy Garland, Judy Garland. And I was like, keep talking. Every day at lunch, because he'd just written the book. And Lana Turner, and he talked a lot about the old times. My favorite Mickey Rooney story is the fight scene when we run down into the basement.
It's gold.
So we're not really in a basement, we're actually at stage level. And they build stairs up to a catwalk. And Mickey and I, he signed a book for my grandma, and I'll forever love him, because she was a huge fan, and so am I, and I still have the book, because she passed away. But he and I were on this catwalk, and on action, we're supposed to throw open the door and run down into the basement. Again, that's at stage level. And the catwalk was really rickety, and they had a lot of insurance on Mickey Rooney, right? A lot. They had to buy a lot of insurance. I think he only worked a week on the film, to be honest, maybe 7 days, and he made like 40 grand, which back then was a lot of money it's still a lot of money for 7 days work. Yeah. But he did it for the money. But I tell you, he did it for the money, but he was 100% pro, and he makes, he performs.
He's genuinely scary in the movie.
Yeah.
As we've seen.
So we're up on the catwalk, and it's very rickety, and it moves, so you gotta be careful up there. And he goes, watch this. And he starts tap dancing. And the whole catwalk starts doing this. And the assistant director, the first AD, runs up, Mr. Rooney, stop. Could you stop that, please? That was great. We laughed and laughed, and we did it again. And every time we went up there, he'd do something to make it look like he was going to fall and scare everybody. That was fun. I had the best time in that role, and I really loved auditioning for it. I had to audition for Brian, even though I'd worked for him before, and of course. And I remember rehearsing for the audition in my friend Heather's house, and I took a broomstick and I shoved it down the back of my shirt and into my blue jeans so that I had to walk like this. And then I tried to walk as naturally as possible, because you're not supposed to know, right? It has to be very subtle. The way he moves, the way he thinks. That was fun. So like with Herbert West, I'd have to figure out my approach to him too. But you're making me want to do another movie. That was fun.
Give him a round of applause. That
That's also the wonderful, thank you for saying that. That is also the wonderful thing about our genre. You can open a door in the floor and go to Neverland. I mean, your imagination is your only limitation, whether you're writing it, watching it, or performing in it. So I really fell in love with it. That was really the most fun. It's a lot more fun than, would you like some coffee, sir? Okay, be right back. Although that's good work too.
Listen, we only scratched the surface. I mean, this guy's done some incredible stuff. Worked with Toby Hooper on Spontaneous Combustion. I mean, that exploding scene is cinematic. Thank you. And that was a great time. And we're gonna wrap this up. Thank you so much for coming out. But I want you to tell one more story, and then we're going to say goodbye.
Okay.
But I don't think you guys realize that we're in the presence of a great musician here.
Oh no.
Is there a story about perhaps the 1996 Olympics you can tell us?
Well, yes. How in the world did you know this?
I did my research.
Oh, okay. Well, when I was in Los Angeles as an actor, a bunch of actors and I, and some very good musicians, formed a group called Elijah and Zoo. I think my partner, Robert, music partner, actually was trying to say Elysium, like Elysium Fields, and he came up with this like Elijah Zoo. And what the hell? Okay. And we wrote some very beautiful music. We smoked way too much pot to ever make an album, so you know. But we all lived in LA and decided that we're done. We're serious musicians now. We're done with acting. We don't have to live in LA anymore. It's a tough city. And so we moved to Atlanta specifically because my family was all in this area and I hadn't seen them for years and years regularly. And the Olympics were coming and we moved here with the goal of playing the 96 Olympics. Well, we came to Atlanta. We played out in Los Angeles and we were doing pretty good. And I think if we'd stayed there, we might have gone further with opportunities. But we moved, whatever. Left everything in LA, moved here to Atlanta. And we played out a lot, started getting popular there. Of course, we weren't going to play at the Olympics, like we didn't have a chance in hell, right? We were playing like local bars and clubs and had a little following going. The night before we performed at the Olympics, we got a call from a company called Jupiter Management, and they said, we've had somebody back out of the Samsung Expo, and we want you guys to play the Olympics tomorrow night. True story. And we were just about to break up. We were talking about it. We're like, okay, wow, we did it. The power of visualization. Sometimes it'll take a long, long time, but if you really visualize it and set your mind to it, look what happens. So, I think that was a couple of days before, obviously. The night before we played, Richard Jewell bombed the Olympics. Yeah, so we played the Samsung Expo to 4 people. And then we broke up. And I was like, okay, this is a sign. But hey, you know, we did it.
That's an incredible story. You kind of have your moment in history on a multitude of levels. Let's give
Thank you,
the 1, 2, 3, the
Living!
a round of applause. Brian Bremer, stop by his booth. Stop by our booth too.
If anybody wants to come up on the autograph, it'll be in our booth. The sign-up sheet will be there. Thank you.
And I think we're at the table for a couple more hours. Come.